Another Monday, another episode of Ask Me Anything. First off, I just want to say huge shout out and thank you to everyone who hung out in the very first stream last night where we watched the Red Wings versus Ducks game together. I had a lot of fun. Overall, I think it went really well. I definitely plan on doing another one. Probably this week. I'll give you guys an update in a video or on the community tab when I have a date. And of course, huge thank you to every single one of you who took the time to leave a question on the post for this Ask Me Anything. Obviously, I can't feature every question, but just know I read them all and I appreciate every single one of you guys. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and get started. The first question of the video comes from Calgary Flames fan 13, who says, which team that's in a playoff spot right now do you think could drop out, and which team do you think could go on a run and get themselves into a playoff spot? And also, thank you for the kind words. We'll answer the first part to your question first. So which team in a playoff spot do I think will drop out? It's not from the Eastern Conference. Like, looking at the Eastern Conference playoff picture right now, I don't want to say it's set because, I mean, anything can happen in the NHL, but like Detroit is on the outside looking in. They're the closest team to a wildcard spot that's not in the playoffs, and I don't see Detroit making the playoffs like at all. I would not be surprised if every single team that's in a playoff spot right now in the Eastern Conference make the playoffs, and it just stays this way. So we'll have to go to the Western Conference to answer this, and for a team that I think could drop out, I'm going to say the Los Angeles Kings. They're currently occupying the second wildcard spot, and I just don't know if they're there quite yet in terms of being a playoff team. I mean, obviously they're going to be playoff contenders. I think they're going to be in the race right till the end of the season, but I could 100% see a team like the Winnipeg Jets overtaking them and grabbing one of those wildcard spots. So I guess those will be my two answers. I could see the Kings dropping out and the Winnipeg Jets going on a run and getting in. Moving on now to the next question. This one comes from Adam Warren, who says, with the latest NHL expansion and talks for teams in Quebec or East Coast Canada, do you think it's feasible for the NHL to have 34 to 36 teams, or more likely 2 relocations? I really can't see the NHL expanding anytime soon, like within the next 10 years. I think they're pretty complacent with having 32 teams, having an even number of teams in each conference, because then if you expand and add one more team and you go to 33, then it's uneven again. So I really can't see them expanding anytime soon, but relocation, that is something I could see happen over the next, couple of seasons. Obviously, the Arizona Coyotes, there's always talk about them moving that team, which I do think is something that's just going to happen eventually. I mean, it seems like there's always something going on with that team that just isn't a good look. This next question comes from Logan Teal 86, who says, assuming Evander Kane's contract termination goes through, do you see any desperate or contending teams sign him? If so, who do you think pulls the trigger? Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Evander Kane's time in the NHL is done and he goes to play in the KHL or something. It just seems like the guy cannot stay out of trouble. He was suspended by the Sharks for using the fake vaccine passport, and now they want to terminate his contract because he violated AHL's COVID protocol, which, I mean, like, come on, dude. I just don't know if there's going to be a team out there willing to take on that risk and have all that baggage that comes along with Evander Kane. Even contending teams, I just don't know if that would be worth it. And don't get me wrong, Evander Kane is a great player, but is he even going to be able to stay on the ice? Is he not going to be a distraction? You have all that stuff to worry about, so I don't think we see him playing the NHL this season at least. Moving on now, this question comes from the Ultim8 Apple, who says, is Anton Lundell the most underrated rookie this year? The maturity he shows makes it seem like he's been in the league for years. Being on that good of a team makes him stand out less compared to other rookies, yet he's playing great. I don't think it's a stretch at all to say Anton Lundell is the most underrated rookie this season. We talked about him a good bit in the stream last night. I believe he leads the NHL in terms of takeaways by a forward. He's already such a good two-way centerman at such a young age. He's also fantastic on the penalty kill. It's funny to say because he's on his team, but he's like a mini Barkov, honestly. He's a rookie that may not be at the forefront of the Calder Trophy conversation right now, but if he gets hot offensively for a month, I honestly think he can be right there in the conversation, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that he wins the award. I love Anton Lundell's game. Next up, we have a question from Young Grady, who says, thoughts on the Jets potentially playing games in Saskatchewan since the COVID restrictions won't be as strict? I'm all for this. I would love to see it happen. I think it would be great for Saskatchewan to be able to host NHL games. I mean, they were a fantastic host whenever the World Juniors were there. Always a raucous crowd no matter who was playing, even if it was like Switzerland and the Czech Republic, the building was always full. I think they would show out for Winnipeg Jets games. And hey, if it happens, and maybe if it goes incredibly well, the NHL could think about, relocation to Saskatchewan or potentially expanding there one day, who knows. This next question comes from the amazing gamer 6736. What are your thoughts on Alex Kerfoot? He already has more points than last season and is on pace for his best season yet and can play anywhere in the lineup. Yeah, Kerfoot is playing really well. Like you said, he can play anywhere in the lineup. He's one of those Swiss Army knife kind of forwards. He can play, second power play minutes. He can kill penalties. It makes sense as to why he has more points already this season than he did last season, because last year, for the most part, he was the third line center or played a little bit of wing on the third line sometimes, and this season he's pretty much been exclusively a winger in the top six, and I feel like he earned that opportunity. He was one of the Leafs' better forwards in their first round matchup against the Montreal Canadiens, and this season he has proved he can keep up with the likes of William Nylander and John Tavares and complement those guys really well. Next up, we have a question from Awesome Zach, who says, what are your thoughts on Zach Fucale's incredible start? I remember you said he was one of your favorite players going into the 2013 draft, but he never really broke out. Do you think he can be a consistent starter in the NHL? I'm really happy for Zach Fucale. I did say that heading into the 2013 draft. He was one of my favorite players because he was the goaltender of the Halifax Mooseheads when McKinnon was there, when Drouin was there, when they had those amazing teams. And now all these years later, after being, I believe, a second round pick by Montreal in 2013, I think it was, he now holds the NHL record for the longest start to a goaltender's career without allowing a goal. That's a record he's probably going to have for a long time. I would love nothing more than to see Zach Fucale carve out a nice NHL career for himself and be a consistent, not even starter, but even a backup. And I think that's something that he can do. I mean, we know with goaltenders, they take a really long time to develop, and oftentimes they kind of come out of nowhere in their mid to late 20s. This next question comes from AEO234, who says, does Brian Rust re-sign with the Penguins also with his recent play, and assuming he keeps this up and gets, let's say, 60 to 70 points, how much is he worth dollar-wise? I actually didn't know Brian Rust is an upcoming UFA until I read this comment, and if he hits the open market without signing an extension with the Penguins, I mean, he's gonna be one of the more intriguing players available, I feel like. He's 29 years old, is having an incredible season, like you said. He's on a fantastic pace, and really he's been fantastic for the past 3 seasons now, including this one. Dollar-wise, I could definitely see him getting a similar contract to Zach Hyman, maybe a little bit less term and more money, like 6.5. I could definitely see some teams signing Brian Rust to that amount of money. I would honestly like to see him stay in Pittsburgh just because I think it's the perfect fit for him, but if he hits the open market, there's going to be a ton of teams interested in him. Moving along now, this next comment comes from Marianne Maxon, who says, the Predators are now first in the Central Division, yet still it seems like no one is talking about them. Why is this, and how do you think the Preds will do for the remainder of the season and postseason? And also, I appreciate the kind words. That is a really good point. There's not a lot of people talking about the Nashville Predators. I mean, UC Saros is playing like a Vezina candidate just like he did last season. I think that's probably the biggest reason why they've had so much success. And also, they're a really physically imposing team. They wear other teams down. They're relentless on the forecheck. I think a guy like Tanner Jeannot has really brought new life into this team. You have the resurgence of Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson. They've had a fantastic start to the season. If I had to guess, I don't think they finished the season in first place in the Central. I feel like that's going to belong to Colorado. But I mean, at this point, I'd be surprised if they miss the playoffs. And they're one of those teams where if they get in, I feel like they could go on a run because they play such a playoff style of hockey. This next question comes from Nicholas Anderson, who says, do you think Rossi and Boldy are going to be full-time NHLers now that they've been called up, or will they get sent back down to develop more? We actually already know the answer to this. They were sent back down by the Minnesota Wild, I think yesterday, or maybe it was Rossi was sent back down to the AHL, and then I think they just moved Boldy to the taxi squad. But honestly, I think it's smart that the Minnesota Wild being so patient with these guys because they don't need them in the lineup right now. This is a really good team even without those guys playing. I believe in both of their first NHL games, they only played around 8 minutes. You really don't want to rush these kinds of prospects. I think the most likely scenario is we see both of them play the majority of the season in the minors, and then next season is when they really break into the league and become full-time NHLers. Moving along now, this question comes from Ian Yang, who says, not really related, but who got the biggest steal in your fantasy draft this year? Love the vids. I appreciate the support. Not to be biased here or anything, but I did draft Vladimir Tarasenko with the 141st overall pick, and he's been like a top 30 player all year, so that was a pretty good draft pick by me personally. But just looking at the draft results here, there was someone in my league that selected Chris Kreider 177th overall, which was in the 15th round, and Chris Kreider's been like a top 20 player all year fantasy-wise, so I would say that is probably the biggest steal of the entire draft. Next up, this question comes from Fluxen. I hope I said that properly, but the question is, do you think the NHL ends up playing all 82 games this year or cuts it down to maybe another 56, 60 game season? I think we see all 82 games get played for sure. I mean, maybe there'll be a team or two that has to do it by a points percentage and can't finish the season, but I think the NHL is going to get it done. Now, the reason I say that is because obviously we have that huge gap where the Olympics would have been for NHL players, that they can now reschedule games in that area. If that wasn't the case and the NHL players were going to the Olympics still, I wouldn't be so sure about this, but now that they have that big period of time where they can reschedule a bunch of games, I think they do fit it all in. This next question comes from Sean English, who says, do you think the Rangers should pay Ryan Strome a substantial amount of money? There seems to be a split between the fan base on his actual value. I honestly think committing 7+ mil AAV to him would be a mistake. What do you think? Ryan Strome has been really good for the Rangers. I feel like it's almost been overlooked how good he's been for them over the past couple of seasons because he plays, behind the likes of Mika Zibanejad, who's really the top centerman on this team. I honestly feel like around a 7 mil AAV would be fair for the production he's given them over the past couple of seasons, but let's say, he asks for 8.5, then that's not something I'd be comfortable paying him. He's a really important player for the Rangers. If they do get the sense that maybe they could lose him, they have to have a good backup plan to replace him, because I don't think a guy like Philip Hedl is good enough to be, a second line center on a contending team. So those are my thoughts on it. I think paying him around 7 million AAV would be fair, but anything more than that, especially with how much money they're paying the likes of Panarin and Zibanejad, would be a little bit tough, I feel like. And now for the final question of the video, this one comes from Wizard Tower, who says, has William Nylander established himself as a top 15 20 winger in the National Hockey League? I think he has 1000%. I feel like William Nylander is often overlooked because Toronto has the likes of Matthews, Tavares, Marner, obviously all those guys. But William Nylander really is, I would argue, just as important to this team as somebody like Mitch Marner. I remember when Nylander signed his extension, everyone was talking about how overpaid he was, but now that contract, which is like a hair under 7 million a season, looks like a steal for how well he's been playing. He's scoring at like a 40 goal pace, he's above a point per game, he's been fantastic. So top 15 20 winger in the NHL this season especially, I feel like for sure he has been. So that is going to wrap up today's episode of the Ask Me Anything series. I'm not sure if there's going to be another one of these next Monday. I might wait a week in between just so, there's some time for more things to happen and more things for you guys to ask questions about. But if you guys are enjoying the series as much as I am, please be sure to leave it a like. That is the best way to show your support. And if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.